Once you've been photographing real estate listings for a while, you should really think about expanding into higher paying markets that also can be more consistent work, and that includes architectural photography for builders, designers, remodel companies, because if you're just working in the listing market, it can be a long-term struggle. For instance, only about 40% of all agents will make it to 2 years. About 50% of real estate agents will make it to 4 years, and there's only about 10% of all real estate agents that make it to 10 years or more, because real estate listing market, that's a real tough market when they're working off commission only. But when you're talking about these other companies, when you're talking about architectural work for builders and remodel companies and whatnot, those companies have lasted for generations, and they're still going to be around probably for many generations to come. So it is a little bit of a different market when you're talking about real estate listing to architectural photography, but you've probably got already the right equipment if you've been doing real estate photography already, and there are just some differences, and I want to talk about some tips in this particular episode. Overall though, before sharing those tips, there is something that's a big difference between the two to really differentiate, and that's that when we talk about real estate listings, the motto is space sells, but when you're talking about architectural photography, it's the subject that sells. So when you're trying to sell real estate, a lot of times, yes, ultra wide works really well, and they do want to show the space and also some of the features of the house. But when you're working for, let's say, an architectural firm that they've done a building or they've done some other type of work, then you want to be able to show, yes, necessarily the space, but also the features. For instance, if it was a remodel company and they didn't do the cabinets, they didn't do the floor, they might want more concentration, for instance, on the countertops. If it was a different company that also did the flooring and the cabinets, they might want a different concentration on there. Those are some of the things I'm going to be talking about in this episode, as well as techniques to use as you're on site working with clients, so that this can also help you get clients so that you can get this longer lasting work that, I know it sounds catchy, but it can actually pay more with having you work less than if you were to just stay in the real estate listing market entirely. Now, with that said, I still do a lot of real estate listing photography. It's over 50% of my work. When I first started out doing real estate photography, it was 100%. But as I got better and better, then I was able to advertise my skill set to architectural type of gigs, and I was able to start getting those, and then those are long-lasting clients, and the more you have them, they say it's like feeding off the whale. It can be hard to get, but once you do get it, then you can eat off of it for a lifetime. So that's where some of this comes in. So let's start talking about these tips. The first tip is to know if you're ready or not. You don't want to go and approach these companies that might be doing remodeling in your area, which are pretty easy to seek out. You can find them, they'll be online, and you already know that they're going to be established. That's different from looking for real estate agents, but you have to make sure that you're good. You have to be really good. And that's where starting out in the listing market is good, because you can really build your skill set. But it's too common in the real estate listing market to just say, well, we can squeak by with maybe some HDR and maybe outsource that. That's not going to cut it when you get into the higher level work. So it's good to start, even while you're doing listings right now, if you haven't moved in to the architectural market, to start upping your game, to really get good. Now, as you know, that's something I can help you with. As you know, I've got online courses, and they include professional interior photography, so that you can learn the real high skill sets applied to listings and architectural photography, and also my expert editing course. And those are just some of the courses that I have in my whole series of real estate photography online courses. And by the way, if you're looking at those courses, make sure you take a look at the bundles where you can get a discount for buying more than one course. The next tip is to, when you show up to an architectural shoot, this will be a lot different than for the listing market, because for the listing market, you go in, it's ready, you go through a property as quick as you can because you're not getting paid by the hour. But when you're doing these architectural type of shoots, they are getting paid by the hour. So you have to figure out your hourly rate, and then I always charge a 2-hour minimum, and if I need to, then travel time. But the real tip here is that you need to be able to first work with your client up front. It's going to set a lot of expectations, because every single one of my architectural clients has a different requirement. You just can't broad brush the whole thing and say that Architectural gigs will like a very moody, dark looking close-up picture of everything. Far from it. Each one of my clients, even from builder to builder, those will be different. So it's good when you first arrive to walk through the shoots with your client, what they're thinking about doing. As you do and you're walking through this, listen, that's really the key. And also a few questions. You'll start getting clues to what they want. Sure, they'll show you, hey, we want to capture the kitchen from this angle. We want to capture it from this angle. And that's all fine, but listen to things they say. And if you don't hear these things, then you might want to bring them up if they don't mention, for instance, color. So if they're talking about that they did some special coloring on the cabinets compared to the walls, compared to the flooring, stuff like that, then you need to make sure, because they'll be more cognizant of that when it goes to you providing their photos for them. Also, are they really impressed with the amount of natural light that comes through? Well, if they are, then if you're using the flambient technique, then you want to put a little bit more ambient luminance in those areas. Some people might not like that. They'll want to showcase other things better, so you'll be able to get that good balance. But as you know, if you've been doing flambient, one of the techniques that I recommend, then you know you can control that amount of ambient luminance anyways. Also, you have to be aware of if they're talking about the view to the outside. A lot of times that means nothing for a lot of designers. Sometimes it does if there's a view out there that can add some type of complementary subject to the primary subject, which is what they're doing. Also, if it's for a builder, they might want to be able to see the backyard or a pool, but you don't always have to pull. So the question becomes to pull or not to pull. So you'll be able to hear this from your client, and if you don't, you can just bring it up and then you'll know to what level you want to do a window pull. And the other, keep an ear out for the features that they're talking about. If they say something about a sink that was imported from Italy, or if there was some special design nook that they made, something that was really particular to that client, that means they want to have that photographed. And this leads into the next tip, which is keeping the client engaged. So unlike doing real estate listings, which you want to get in and out of there as quick as possible, since you're getting paid by the hour, take the time to do this right, and you should be shooting tethered if you can. Now, you can simply use a Cam Ranger, and I have some clients that just look on the back screen of my camera. I have other clients that want me to bring a laptop and to be able to see what's going on. Now, on those laptop jobs, what I'll do is I'll shoot tethered wirelessly, and I'll just take some ambient test shots. So before I start doing everything together for gathering all the footage for a particular shot, I'll take one ambient shot and then talk to them about it. You'll start hearing other stuff come through. For instance, one of the very common things is, oh, we need to move some staging items. Let them go ahead and move it. Let them futz around as much as you want because you're getting paid by the hour. Take another shot. See what they think. Keep this open, engaged conversation going, because you'll start hearing things too. Since it's an ambient shot, the colors aren't going to be accurate, so you're not until you start incorporating flash to get the more accurate colors. But with that ambient shot, you'll start hearing, are they very color sensitive to the image? Do they like the amount of natural light? If you start hearing stuff like, oh my gosh, that's just so bright, well, then you know that they want that ambient light toned down. And the third tip really applies to this, and that's that don't rush it. Take your time, do this right. Double check, triple check. That means checking your white balance. It's probably best to use manual white balance, and one of the techniques that I show in my Pro Interiors course, very easy to do if you understand the colors that are going on in the scene and you're not just using ambient, you're using the flambient technique. But even if you're doing high-end HDR like I show in my expert editing course, then yeah, you still want to make sure that your white balance is good and that you've got your focus correctly. So you got to make sure and double check all these things as you're going along, but take the time to do it right. That also means don't rush the client. If they're looking through pictures, as you're shooting them, let them talk about it. Once again, stay engaged. But there's an exception to that. And that's that sometimes when it comes to remodel companies, very few times on builders because it'll be a new property. But when it comes to remodel jobs, usually someone's already living at the house, condo, or at this particular property. And these clients really don't want you there. Sure, they'll be nice, they'll be amicable, but you really should think about moving on as quickly, and your client may be aware of that too. So I do have some remodel companies that I work for, and they know when I show up, it's like, yeah, we're gonna try to get this one done in just a couple hours and be out of there. There's others that I show up for, they've got a whole afternoon. Sometimes they'll even buy me lunch so that I can stay into the afternoon if I showed up for a morning shoot. But anyways, don't rush it unless you really have to. And if you do, still try to get it right. Do as much as you can. This is, once again, a paid by the hour gig, and there's going to be higher expectations for the quality that you produce. And the next tip, and I touched on it a little bit earlier, is don't rely on HDR and outsourcing. So it's very common in the kind of run and gun real estate market where you just capture some HDR, you outsource it, and you get some pictures the next morning. That won't cut it in the architectural market. For one, you aren't going to have nearly as many shots to have to worry about. You could be at a place for a couple hours and get 6 shots, 8 shots, 10 shots. That's all you're going to be doing. You're going to be taking the time to do it right. More so, any outsourced editor isn't going to be able to understand why you took the footage you did or what the client was telling you as you were engaged with them. But more so is you have to up your game on quality. Sure, you could do some HDR, and like I show in the expert editing course, there's a lot of futzing around with color layers and whatnot and cutting in windows if you need to, and it's just a lot more work that you're going to be compromising some level of quality. If you start incorporating flash, like I show in Pro Interiors, and I've shown on many videos here, then you know that you can get a very consistent, more accurate color. So don't rely just on HDR and don't outsource your editing. And the next tip is don't shoot ultra wide. Now, you might even know from my books that I don't like to shoot anything tighter, or wider I should say, than 20 millimeters. Now, a lot of times I'm at about 18 when I'm doing real estate listings. When I'm doing architectural photography, it's usually at about 20, but then I'm also cropping some of that down. So it's more at an equivalent of about 24 millimeters. Now, it doesn't mean you have to change lenses. Once again, if you're shooting like a kitchen, you can shoot wide and high, crop down from the top, it'll bring it in from the sides, and then you get an equivalent focal length of right around 24 millimeters while also getting that fake tilt shift effect on there. So something that I've shown in other videos and also in my courses. But don't shoot this 14 millimeter wide stuff. Nobody's gonna like it. It's gonna be distorted. It's just gonna show space. So you wanna have stuff that doesn't have that extension distortion, that wide angle distortion. Remember the first rule when I started this video is that in the real estate listing market, space sells, but in the architectural photography market, it's the subject that sells. And the last tip here is don't be afraid to go vertical. Now, if you're shooting for the listing market, the MLS, the multiple listing services, and sites also like Realtor.com and whatnot, they're going to expect that horizontal format, that landscape type of format. But if you have it shot vertically in portrait, then it might auto-rotate it. So we always tend to shoot for listings in the horizontal type of perspective. But when you're talking about remodel companies and architecture and all that type of work, that's different because they might use those images on a sidebar of a web page, they might use it in a collage of something else, and they want to be able to show all the details, even if they just have it on an iPad as they're interviewing other clients to be able to get the job to do their remodel work. But the biggest thing overall is that if you've been shooting real estate listings for a while and you're either getting tired of it or you want to make more money, then all you have to do is just up your game. Make sure that you're putting in the serious work now to really get good quality out of the images that you have, and then start pursuing other type of markets that can be right local in your area. So it is a goal to try to work toward, but if you're already doing real estate photography, you're already on your way. Just take a few simple steps, up your game, know some of these differences, and start moving forward and diversifying and become a better real estate photographer that can stand out in the competition in your area.